Welcome. Today, cyber warfare. Somebody is attacking our banks and other institutions, and it's not some young hacker in jeans pumped up on Red Bull. We will look for the real suspects. Also today, a tribute to an internet revolutionary who died way too young, Aaron Swartz, plus a film festival celebrating women as leaders. But first, the new budget proposed by Governor Andrew Cuomo. It's our money. Let's see how we're spending it. Before we dig into the details, where the devils might lurk, let's watch one of the few parts of the governor's budget address where he was not being, the policy wonk showing charts. Rather, here he is yet again lecturing legislators and pleasing the public with a theme that has kept him popular, that it's a new era in Albany.
Paying for performance and results from every one of our programs, from every one of our agencies. This is not just about funding a budget. It's about producing results for people. And this is a different mentality than the old mentality that said every year put more money in the budget, more money on the budget, more money in the budget. More money in the budget will mean more results. No. More money in the budget just meant more money in the budget. More money in the budget just meant you were hurting the economic development and fiscal responsibility because you weren't producing better results for people. We've had one of the most expensive education systems in the country. Not one of the highest performing. And every year the answer was, well, put more money in the budget and maybe we'll get more results. Nobody lives that way. Nobody in their private life. Nobody hires a vendor, has them come to the house to fix something. It doesn't work. They call up the vendor and they say, come back again tomorrow. I'll pay you more and maybe you'll get it right. No. Pay for results, pay for performance. And put the customer first. This is not about funding bureaucracies. This is about providing services for people.
Part of Governor Cuomo's budget address last week. The budget contains specific cuts, but a modest overall increase in spending, including for education. There are modest increases in revenues, too. Overall, the balance sheet looks better than in recent years. But is there massive red ink to come if, say, the city economy sputters? And what's with those delays in funding some pensions? We'll talk about that. Greg David is here to unpack this budget. He directs the Business and Economics program here at the Graduate School of Journalism at the City University, also a columnist for Crain's New York Business. Hi, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So the state is closing a budget gap of $1.3 billion. That's small. 2 years ago, the budget gap was $10 billion. Is this indicative of recovery from the financial crisis?
You know, I was in an editorial board with the governor recently, and, he called it a rounding error. In our budget, $1 billion is a rounding error.
Well, out of a $142 billion budget, maybe it is.
He is right. Now, I actually think that much of this has to do with what he did. He took credit for it in that meeting, and he deserves credit. He has sharply curtailed state spending. He cut Medicaid to start with. He cut education to start with. He's restoring a little bit of Medicaid money, more education money. But he has really squeezed the state operations every year. He believes it's wasteful and needs to be more efficient. So he gets a lot of credit for it. Is the economy better? The New York City economy is a lot better, but upstate is not better. And indeed, he spent a lot of time in his speech and in this meeting talking about how desperate the situation is upstate and how it's actually a downstate problem too, because what's happening, of course, is that all this money from downstate and tax revenues just flowing upstate because we're all one state and we need to support those cities.
Right. What was it like being with the governor for an hour in the editorial board meeting? How's he presenting this year? What kind of an impression did he make on you?
He's just a softer version of the clip you ran. He's in total...
Softer?
Yes, and he spoke more softly, let me put it that way. He's in total command of the issues. He's in total command of the room. He had done a Crain's edit board back when he was Attorney General, so maybe 4 years before. He seemed to recall every detail of that meeting 4 years ago and went over what we talked about and how skeptical I was that he could make any changes.
And so here we are. I want to ask about one education piece of the budget, since we showed the clip of him talking about how money doesn't always make the difference. They are going to give grants, if this budget passes, to school districts that want to either lengthen the school day or lengthen the school year by 25%, especially in low-income areas. I've already spoken to some teachers who don't like this, who say we're already so underfunded for what we do from 9 to 3, or whatever the usual school day is, that paying more money to extend the school day is just going to stretch everybody super thin. Do you see a battle coming over this?
What else would teachers say? Come on, let's be realistic. He's exactly right. New York has the most expensive education system in the state, in the country, with average or worse results. I think he is big on performance, and he is going to move a lot of programs. He's moved economic development programs to competitions and incentive-based rewards. And in the end, he works. As for the longer school day, charter school results are pretty clear. It makes a big difference.
It's one of the things that the education reformers say makes a big difference for the lowest performing kids, usually the lowest income kids. And so trying to implement that outside of the charter school system, which is still the exception in public education, would be a pretty interesting step.
It is, but remember, there's not that much money, right?
Right.
This is going to start modestly, and what he's hoping to do is to encourage other people to figure out ways to do it.
The city economy, you said, is coming back very well, and yet we also see Wall Street bonuses declining, not only for Jamie Dimon, famously, after a certain flameout last year, but in general. Does that indicate something larger about the city's economy, or is Wall Street its own reality?
No, they're all completely connected, and here's the way the story goes. The New York City economy has outperformed the nation by a lot. We are at an all-time peak in jobs. The country hasn't even regained half of the jobs it lost in the Great Recession. So we've done extraordinarily well. This year won't be quite as good. As a matter of fact, New York's economy will grow this year, but much more slowly. After that, say, every economist I talk to, things will be really bright for the next 4 years. The Independent Budget Office of the city sees us adding another 250,000 jobs, see the unemployment rate falling to 6%, in what would be the longest expansion of the New York City economy in 4 decades. But you know why they say that?
Why?
Because they see Wall Street recovering. Because they say, despite the headlines of bonuses, ever since the 1960s, every downturn on Wall Street has been followed by a revival. The people who hate Wall Street are not going to like that scenario, but if it's true, the city's economy is headed to a plateau it's never seen. If it's not true, there are going to be big problems.
But the assumption there is not just that the economy is going to come back and Wall Street firms are going to make money again, which is probably a pretty safe bet, but that a lot of the jobs are staying here rather than going to Charlotte or Tokyo or wherever else.
They're not going anywhere. That's the biggest myth of all time. What's happened is that those back office jobs just get eliminated by technology. All the people who make any money are here. You know, but here's the real issue. Will Dodd-Frank, will financial reform, will the attitudes towards Wall Street change the way Wall Street is? Will Wall Street not be able to reinvent itself? And not just reinvent itself, pay the kinds of extraordinary bonuses and salaries that make everyone else mad and New York rich. And that, the economists I talk to are sure that's going to happen. My crystal ball isn't that good.
So you're talking about Dodd-Frank and Washington regulation of Wall Street. President Obama is nominating Mary Jo White, the former federal prosecutor here in New York, to head the Securities and Exchange Commission, a prosecutor, not a banker. What does that tell you?
Well, they want to send the message that they're going to go after Wall Street miscreants. That's good. I think everybody who wrote those stories seems to have forgotten the SEC only has civil jurisdiction, not criminal jurisdiction. And by the way, she worked as a defense lawyer in recent years for all those bad people.
She did?
She did.
For the banks?
Yes. So we'll see what really happens.
So is
about
she
it.
an insider or an outsider?
Good knows. But you know, to me, the issue is unclear. Just because Wall Street recovered from every previous disaster doesn't, to me, mean it's inevitable that it will happen again. And if we go back to the way Wall Street paid itself, just say in 1993, city and state tax revenues will plummet. They have already plummeted. Wall Street accounted for 20% of all the state tax revenue in 2007, down to 14%, 13% of the city tax revenue. That number's down to 7%. It could be going a lot lower. That, you know, talk about budget problems.
A couple other things in the budget before we run out of time. There are no new taxes, but there are new revenue raisers. They're kind of around the edges, but one of them is an $80 state surcharge on lower level traffic violations, including, as I understand it, some parking tickets, and also a royalties tax, a tax on companies that earn royalties.
Well, you know, they got, in this meeting, they got hot under the collar with the idea that they were new. What they say is there are all these things, all these taxes and fees in the budget which were scheduled to expire, including the royalties one.
That exists
and
now.
they're not going to let them expire.
Okay.
So where the truth of that lies, I can't say.
And the minimum wage to go up by $1.50 an hour if the governor's proposal goes through. Do you see that? Well, I think you bust myths on both the left and the right about the minimum wage. Is that your position?
Yeah, my position is the left never admits that a minimum wage increase will cost you jobs because companies will employ technology, and the right never admits that actually a lot of people will get a raise. But the governor did signal recently that while his budget calls for an immediate increase from $725 to $875, he knows that's not feasible, and some sort of phase-in is in order. $875 would make New York the third highest minimum wage in the country, behind only Washington and Oregon. And while he says it would make us competitive regionally, in fact, we would have the highest minimum wage in the Northeast, and by a lot.
Greg David, thanks a lot, and drive slow, save that $80.
Thank you.
Up next, could a cyber attack on the U.S. bring a financial collapse, and who's the enemy? Between last September and early January, at least 10 banks in the United States, including Bank of America, Citigroup, and HSBC, were hacked. Sites slowed, and for a time, millions of online customers couldn't access their money. But no bank accounts were breached, no money stolen, not yet. And that's the least of our fears surrounding the potential for online warfare. Watch this.
FAA just issued a critical alert. The entire network went down.
Transportation system's crashing, and they just hit the entire financial sector.
You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'll take it from here.
So could that Bruce Willis nightmare scenario from Die Hard 4 actually happen? We might be on our way. The sophistication of these recent bank attacks has led experts to conclude that only a state, not a lone programmer on a diet of Cheetos and Red Bull, you know who you are, could have pulled them off. Are there more sophisticated and far more damaging attacks to come? Here to give us a peek behind the curtains of this covert and high-level world of cyber statecraft is Camino Kavanagh. She's a PhD candidate at the Department of War Studies at King's College London and a resident of the University of Toronto's Canada Centre for Global Studies. She happens to be here in New York, and welcome to our program.
Thank you, Brian.
So the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal seem to have both concluded that it was probably Iran behind those cyber attacks on the banks. Is it clear to you?
No, it's not clear to me. It's also not clear to me why you didn't put on James Bond's Skyfall. That's a bit more recent and quite interesting in terms of how people are viewing the threat of cyber attacks in terms of bringing down, potentially bringing down a nation.
You want to talk more about that movie and
No,
what it brings up? But go ahead.
No, I raised the issue because of the amount of focus that these type of cyber attacks are playing at the moment in relation to how different actors, different experts are actually analyzing the issues.
So if not Iran, who?
If not Iran, we are not very sure. But you mentioned that it could not be individuals or a group of individuals that
That's what most experts being quoted seem to say.
Yes.
Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. It could be a state using a group of individuals as proxies to advance their interests. It could very well be a group of interests doing it out of pure patriotism, or just to cause
Patriotism? You mean to show the banks that there are holes in their security so they can patch them?
Yes, or attack the banks, attack U.S. Facilities, attack U.S. infrastructure on behalf of a country that they believe, or an ideology, or an issue that they believe has been abused by one country or another.
One of the reasons people speculate on Iran is that not only did we apparently attack them with the Stuxnet virus targeted at their nuclear facility, but also the sanctions that we put on their financial system have these financial impacts, so they perhaps decided to target our financial system tit for tat.
Exactly, and it does, when looking at the analysis that has come out in relation to the attacks, it does appear as if you build on all of these different elements, the economic sanctions against Iran, the fact that the U.S. along with Israel have allegedly attacked the Natanz facilities, and the use of flame and duku and other forms of viruses that have been found in Iranian systems. Yes, one would be led to believe that these...
You and your op-ed co-author, Misha Glenny, seem to say that the U.S. and Israel really crossed the Rubicon with those Stuxnet attacks. And certainly other people, too, have warned that that started a whole new era of cyber warfare. And once that cat is out of the bag, it's hard to put it back in, and it could be really, really dangerous. And yet I don't think the public is worried about this, at least not yet. I think the public thinks, well, we're not bombing each other, so if we're messing with each other's computers, I'll live with that.
Yes and no. First of all, I think we have to be very cautious about how we throw around the term warfare. That in itself is highly polemic and very disputed within academia and within policy circles. I'm studying under Thomas Rid, an information warfare expert at the Department of War Studies at King's College London, who is just coming out with a book called Cyber War Will Never Take Place. So he's looking at the classic Clausewitzian definition of warfare.
So what would the definition of war be that doesn't include cyber warfare?
An act of war, you would need physical violence, instrumentality, and a political reason to actually conduct that attack.
And maybe this is just a semantic argument, but if you're using computers to try to cripple a country or severely weaken it so one country could get an advantage over another, is that not a type of warfare?
It could be a type of subversive act. It could be an act of sabotage. Acts of sabotage have existed historically. And then we have a large number of the actual attacks are actual espionage rather than physical attacks.
And why does it matter, by the way, whether we call it espionage or sabotage or war?
Because an act of warfare has war is framed by centuries of developments within the international law field. And I think once we start moving in that direction and saying that we will retaliate or we will preempt these type of attacks with physical violence, it becomes very dangerous in terms of international
So there's another moral dimension to it when it includes physical blood.
Yes.
So how about U.S. policies or even international law concerning cyber attacks? Is there a structure of codes of behavior?
No, absolutely not. Well, there is one, the existing one, which is what the US and like-minded countries insist still applies in relation to these type of issues that are emerging in relation to information security. There's a process that's been that has being conducted within the framework of the UN First Committee on Disarmament since 1998, which very few people are aware of. With the Obama administration, the US approach to that process became much more active, much more engaging with the Russians and Chinese that were trying to actually push for a resolution that would have framed all of these discussions in relation to arms control and the type of things that we don't necessarily want to be discussed at this current time.
So would you like to see something like a Geneva Convention for cyber attacks?
No, but I think what would be very useful would be if some of these countries would actually move forward in relation to these discussions and start discussing norms of responsible behavior in relation to a state's use of ICTs.
So is there a legitimate use, in your view, for states launching cyber attacks against each other?
No, but there is a history of the use of sabotage and covert action, and I think it's knowing where the red marks are in relation to how far are we going to push these red marks in what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior. And that brings me back to that discussion on states coming to some common agreement on what are responsible norms in relation to cyberspace.
Well, I think this is just the beginning of this era, and so many more conversations like this. So thank you very much for clarifying for our viewers this latest piece of it, because I think we're going to have to build on that with our knowledge base as time goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, a tribute to an internet revolutionary, Aaron Swartz, who died way too young. On January 11th, the internet community lost a beloved member, Aaron Swartz. Aaron had faced federal charges and certain jail time fighting for something he had dedicated his life to, the free flow of information and knowledge online. It was a suicide. He was only 26. In honor of Aaron and those principles, we thought we would take a deeper look at his message, plus the impact his death has had on the cause and the enforcement of intellectual property rights and the preservation of innovation in the internet age. We are joined in our studio by Cardozo Law professor Susan Crawford, author of Captive Audience, The Telecom Industry and Monopoly Power in the New Gilded Age. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
Aaron Swartz, why was he important?
Aaron Swartz was not only a builder of amazing software from a very young age, he was also committed to civil liberties online in all areas. And he had dedicated his very short life to learning more. He's a very curious guy, speaking up and understanding how he could push for the freedom of information around the world. And he had had an enormous impact for someone so young.
Let's give people a little glimpse of him, since most of our viewers probably have never heard of him. Last year, this is August 16th of last year, Aaron spoke about the defeat of SOPA, that's the Stop Online Piracy Act, at the IT consultancy firm ThoughtWorks. So let's take a look at a clip from that speech, specifically where Aaron speaks directly about when he fully realized what he considered the motivations of some government officials regarding the Stop Online Privacy Act, which he thought was a bad idea.
I remember when that moment first hit me. I was at an event and I got introduced to a US senator, one of the strong proponents of the original COICA bill. And I asked him why, despite being such a strong progressive, despite having just given a speech in favor of civil liberties, he was supporting a bill that would censor the internet. And that typical politician smile faded from his face, and his eyes started burning this fiery red, and he started shouting. "Those people on the internet," he yelled, "they think they can get away with anything. They think they can just put anything up, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. They put up everything. They put up the plans to our fighter jets, and they just laugh at us. Well, we're going to show them. There's going to be laws on the internet. It's got to be under control." Now, as far as I know, no one has ever put up the plans to US fighter jets on the internet. I mean, that's just something I've heard about. But that's sort of the point. I mean, it wasn't a rational concern. It was this irrational fear that things were out of control. Here was this man, a United States senator. And those people on the internet, they were just mocking him. They had to be brought under control. Things had to be under control. And that was the attitude of Congress. And just to seeing the fire in that senator's eyes scared me. I think it scared a lot of people to see that hearing. This wasn't the attitude of a thoughtful government trying to resolve trade-offs in order to best represent its citizens. This was the attitude of a tyrant. And the citizens fought back.
So obviously somebody fully engaged in life and work just 5 months before he took his own life. Why was he under indictment?
Aaron was under indictment because he had used his technological prowess to attach to the MIT network, which was very open, and download a lot of articles from an online database that's available to scholars at universities across the country. And in that database were almost 5 million academic articles. Not necessarily funded by federal research, but certainly part of an academic corpus. And Aaron downloaded those articles.
What was he looking for?
He wanted to free those articles. We don't actually know what he wanted to do with them. We just know that he downloaded an awful lot of them. And MIT saw this activity on its network and alerted the police, who arrested Aaron. And
I gather that MIT was not interested in prosecuting him, but the government went after him anyway. Do I have that right? It was actually JSTOR, that's the name of the online database, who backed off from prosecuting him. I think, from what I understand, when MIT got the police involved, that was kind of an automatic trigger to keep the police involved. It's hard to tell them to go away after you've told them about what's just happened. So things just sort of took their course, and the prosecutor in the case has issued a statement saying that Aaron was justly charged. But what point was he trying to make? Was it that copyright itself is evil, that even copyrighted material should be out there for anybody to download and distribute at their will? Well, luckily for us, in 2008, Aaron published a manifesto about this subject, and he said, "Information is power, but like all power, there are those who want to keep it for themselves." I think he felt, who knows how he felt, but I think he felt frustrated that so much rich information was available to anybody who happened to be on Harvard's or MIT's network, but not to other people. And that seemed wrong to him. Has his death had an impact on his cause? I know it's just been a couple of weeks. You know, I think of this death as a little bit like David Foster Wallace's death. Here's a very, very bright guy who is interested in a lot of other people, and a lot of other people are interested in him. Wallace, the brilliant writer who took his life. Who took his own life. And it was a stunning tragedy, and it made people focus on Wallace and his books in a way that might not have been anticipated. Same thing perhaps here. Aaron's death has been galvanizing for a lot of people, and it's also shown up on the front page of the New York Times, enormous media attention. And so people are now focused, and congressmen are focused, and I'm sure the administration is focused on these issues. And really, it's not about individual academics having copyright rights to their own material. I think his target, as often yours is huge corporations, and very few large corporations controlling a lot of information, correct? I think that's right, and I remember when I saw Aaron a few years ago at a retreat with a bunch of graybeards talking about telecom policy. We get around to Aaron for his final comment. We're all listening very closely. And he says, "I can't imagine that the things that I'm building right now, this software, is not going to be available. They're not going to be available to people freely around the United States because internet access is so constrained." He was really stunned by that, and we were stunned that he was troubled, because we want his generation to be able to communicate as freely as possible. Is internet access so constrained? The internet seems to be everywhere. I just went to Seoul, South Korea, and there people go like this when they talk about internet access in the United States. It feels like a rural vacation to them when they come to this country. They laugh at how expensive it is here. And so, yes, we don't know it. We think of ourselves as being on the forefront of absolutely every development, but in fact, internet access in the United States is controlled by very few players, chiefly the cable monopolies in America. I saw your op-ed in the Times last week. Thanks. How to Get America Online. At the heart of the problem lie a few powerful companies with enormous influence over policymaking. Who are they and what are they doing?
Well, thanks for noticing that op-ed last week. It's basically, on the wired side, Comcast and Time Warner, they divided up the country between themselves. They called it the Summer of Love. You take San Francisco, I'll take Chicago.
Cable companies.
Cable companies distributing internet access. And it's so much cheaper to upgrade a cable connection to provide relatively high-speed access than to dig up a telephone wire and replace it with fiber, that the telephone companies have gotten out of the business of very high-speed internet access. So the cable guys, with their monopolies, are left alone.
Does that mean that FiOS, as an internet access system, is not progressing? Because I thought these cable guys were deathly afraid of the competition that they're getting from FiOS. You're laughing.
I'm laughing because they're cooperating. So the cable guys had made a deal with Verizon, which is the big player for FiOS. They're in a joint marketing agreement. They're not competing. And Verizon in 2010...
Really? I know people at Time Warner, and they're saying, we're doing this and we're doing this so that Verizon doesn't eat our lunch with FiOS.
No, FiOS is only present in 15% of Time Warner's footprint. So they're doing just fine wherever they are, and only present in about 11% of Comcast's footprint. You know who's really worried? Cablevision, here on Long Island, because they face FiOS in 50% of their territory. So that's real competition. But the big cable guys are doing just fine, and 94% of new high-speed access subscriptions go right to them.
So as a matter of policy, is there going to be something like an Aaron's Law in his honor to address exactly these issues?
That's my hope. I think it's going to take several years. These companies are really extraordinarily powerful. But the president, in his inaugural speech last week, gave some really moving indications that he's thinking about economic liberalism, investing in infrastructure so that everybody gets a chance in America, so that everybody can live with dignity. And right now, a big part of that is internet access. If you want to apply for a job, if you want to get access to great educational resources, you've got to have high-speed internet access. So tying this back to Aaron, it's really important to recognize that he suffered from depression and that we don't know why he committed suicide. But he was also interested in all of these information policy issues.
Thank you very much for talking about Aaron and illuminating the issues.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, a film festival with a purpose, showing women as leaders. The Athena Film Festival is coming up starting February 7th. It's 4 days of features, documentaries, and shorts that highlight women's leadership, both in real life and fiction. In other words, the audience will see strong women role models on both sides of the camera. Now, in its 3rd year, the festival is organized by the Athena Center for Leadership Studies at Barnard College and the group Women and Hollywood. As you might have expect of a festival, it features conversations as well with directors and actors, and it also includes workshops for filmmakers. Catherine Colbert, director of the Athena Center, is here to give us a preview and help us screen some trailers from these films. Hi.
Hi, nice to be here.
Is it hard to find films that portray women as leaders?
Well, you know, when we first started, we're now in our 3rd year. When we first started, we found about 200. From which we chose about 35 films. This year seems to be a really good year. More films which highlight women in leadership roles are being made. They're coming up on our radar screen. So we looked at about 300 films in order to pick our lineup.
So maybe that's an indication that this is not rare.
Things are picking up. Well, it is rare. And I think that the reality is most films made by Hollywood, even in the independent world, don't have women in many roles. In fact, for the most part, women are invisible in the Hollywood world, and that's why we started this film festival.
Which is a perfect segue into our first trailer, which is for The Invisible War. And folks, if you watch the Oscars this year, you will see something probably extremely short from this film because it is one of the documentaries nominated for the Best Documentary Oscar. Here's a bit of the trailer.
I joined the military halfway through my senior year of high school, wanting to serve my country.
The Coast Guard said that they could get me in within a month, so it shipped me off.
I loved that I could keep up with the guys and work as hard as they did.
The professionalism, the camaraderie.
Getting out there and giving it my all.
That's what I chose to do.
Everything changed the day that I was raped.
I've never seen trauma like I've seen from veterans who have suffered military sexual trauma.
This goes everywhere with me. You always have protection with Jesus, but sometimes you need just a little bit more.
Most Americans assume there is access to a system of justice.
You'd see a guy get 5 years for drugs and 2 weeks for rape.
They let this man get away with everything but murder.
They gave him Military Professional of the Year award during the rape investigation.
It was a laughing matter.
He says, "You're the third girl to report rape this week. You guys like all in cahoots? You think this is a game?"
That from the trailer for The Invisible War. Obviously an extremely serious issue. Do you want to talk about the film?
Well, the film's a great film. We had it last year as a sneak before it was released publicly. This year it's coming back so we can show a wider audience. And the good part about this film is it's really made a difference. It's brought this issue to light. The military has begun to take seriously the epidemic proportions of rape in the military. And the film producers and directors here really are working toward making this a film that will lead to positive social change. So they have a huge outreach effort. A number of the producers will be at the festival to talk about what they're doing. Great film for people to watch.
When Defense Secretary Panetta last week announced that women would be allowed on the front lines of combat, it wasn't obvious to the general public, but some people were drawing the connection with this rape crisis in the military, that maybe it would actually lead to diminishing that problem. Do you see a connection?
Well, I do, and I think it actually leads right to the heart of this festival, which is our goal here is to change what you see, what you blink when you think about women in leadership. One of the problems in the military is when women are excluded from combat, they are also excluded from rising up the ranks of the military. And so one of the great advantages of the change here is that women will be able to rise up, get combat experience, rise up the ranks, become leaders. And when they are leaders, they will have a different agenda. And I think the plight of women who've been raped will be on it.
All right, so if Band of Brothers was a movie about the military, Band of Sisters is a movie in this film festival, and it's about nuns. Check out the trailer.
I wanted to do two things in my life. I wanted to love God, and I wanted to be perfect. So if you wanted to love God and be perfect in 1966, and you were a Catholic woman, the only choice you had was to enter a convent. And so I did.
For over 1,500 years, cloister and religious habit were absolutely required.
And all that was unchanged for years and years and years and years and years until Vatican II.
Pope John XXIII said we had to re-examine who we were as the church and get back to the core of the teachings of Jesus, which were about compassion and justice, and get rid of what wasn't.
One of the things of Vatican II was to look at the signs of the times.
To be a Catholic then was very exciting. You just felt like you were part of this wave.
Spirituality in the gospel.
We marched with Selma from Seneca Falls to Selma, as somebody said recently.
That's right.
To Band of Sisters. Is this movie being made now because the Vatican II generation of nuns is under assault from the current, more conservative Vatican?
Absolutely, absolutely. And because the story of the nuns really fighting for the rights of all people is a great story. This movie shows that progression. They've been out in the forefront, fighting for the rights of poor people, fighting for the rights of women since the very early days. And so it's a great movie that shows that history. I think the interesting part from my perspective is the Athena Film Festival really tries to show women in leadership roles in a whole range of ways, whether it be women religious, women in the military, women in the environmental movement, women in fashion. We really want to showcase a diverse set of women who have done miraculous things and don't get enough recognition for it.
On a lighter note, Deanna Vreeland. Want to set this up for us?
Well, Deanna Vreeland, a fashion icon, right? How fun is that, right? This is a movie documentary about her. It is terrifically, has been terrifically well received in the film community, has been out in theaters, but not enough people got to see it. So we're bringing it back, and it's a great film.
Let's see some trailer footage.
The fashion world changes all the time. You can even see the approaching revolution in clothes. You can see and feel everything in clothes.
Mrs. Vreeland really brought us into a modern period and knew that fashion and the world were on their way to something much more global.
I wasn't a fashion editor. I was the one and only fashion editor.
She saw things in people before they saw it themselves.
She celebrated Barbra Streisand's nose. She would say, push their faults, make it the most beautiful thing about them.
Deanna was just so far ahead. I mean, it wasn't just about fashion. It was about art. It was about music. And it was a society. It was all woven together.
So is there any dissonance among the curators of the film festival in showing somebody who's involved in fashion as opposed to things that are, you know, more groundbreaking for women?
Well, you know, in some ways, in her time, in her way, she was very groundbreaking for women. And, you know, many of us who weren't involved in the fashion world didn't recognize her brilliance until much later. But, you know, the arts are incredibly important in society, and whether that be fashion or whether it be painting or whether it be sculpture, they ought to be celebrated. And I think, again, I'm coming back to what this festival is all about, which is we want to see women in leadership roles. Why? Because we want to change our culture. Right now, when you think about who's a leader, the first thing you think about is a white man. That little gray temple on the side, you know, gray hair on the temples. You don't really think about women, and so it's important for us to change the conversation, to change what we think of when we think of a leader. And how our culture depicts women as leaders is really important.
And as important behind the camera as on the screen. I mean, maybe, you know, Hillary Clinton is a better role model for leadership of women than anybody in Hollywood.
Well, the way we do this is all the films we show are made, have to have a story of a woman in a leadership role. They can be made by men or women. To us, what's important is the story that's being told. On the other hand, we also think it's important to honor women who've distinguished themselves in the film community. And so we give Athena Awards on the first night of the festival. This year we're giving our Lifetime Achievement Award to Gail Ann Hurd, who is an incredible Hollywood producer who really broke out of traditional roles. She produced such films as The Abyss and Aliens and action-packed adventures, Terminator, Terminator 2. Films that really had never been produced by women, and is a great role model for other filmmakers.
All right, next film, Future Weather. Synopsis: abandoned by her single mom, a teenage girl becomes obsessed with ecological disaster, forcing her and her grandmother, a functioning alcoholic, to rethink their futures, inspired by a New Yorker article on global warming. Watch.
Did you water your plants? Did you water your trees?
Uh-huh.
Do you forgive me?
I still have that feeling. It's like I have no future. Everything's your future.
Where is your mother? Do you know that Roy called me and the goddamn rent check is late again?
I didn't ask to live here.
Watering.
This is Ladder, eh? She's gonna save the world someday.
Is that a political film, or is that a family drama?
It's a little bit of both. And I think the important part is she demonstrates that as a young woman, she can make a difference in the world. She can take the world seriously and have an impact on it. And I think that we actually have 3 sets of films that are made for young audiences, this being one of them. Another, the film Brave, which is an animated film put out by Disney this year and has also been nominated for an Academy Award. And the idea here is to not only have audiences of adults, but to have films where young people can come, young women can come and see role models for themselves, hear different stories than they're used to seeing on screen.
You have some foreign films.
We do.
One we're going to show the trailer for is Putin's Kiss. Can you set this one up?
Well, it's a story, again, of an activist woman. In this case, she was an activist for Putin and the political party.
For Putin.
For Putin in Russia, and then began to question her political loyalties to the administration when one of her friends was shot. So it's an interesting film. Again, the important part from our perspective is it features a woman who takes her role in life seriously, realizes she can make a difference for others, and really plays a leadership role in doing that.
So it helps to understand Russian to watch this, or you can look at the subtitles.
Я хочу рассказать вам историю о современной России. История, которая изменила мою жизнь. Я независимый журналист, и я не принадлежу к числу прокремлевских журналистов.
Россия без Путина! Россия без Путина!
Чтобы не подвергать опасности вновь обретенную стабильность, в какой-то момент Путин решил взять все происходящие в стране политические процессы под свой жесткий контроль. Было принято решение о создании молодежного движения под названием «Наши». Я знал Машу Дрокову как пресс-секретаря движения «Наши». Она пришла в движение, когда ей было 16 лет, и очень быстро поднялась по карьерной лестнице. По сути, наши разделились, да, и есть какое-то такое теневое боевое крыло, в частности, движение «Сталь».
Никогда! Ни лги не предавай! Помни, что живешь в России ты! Это лучшая страна! Здесь не терпят мудаков!
И в какой-то момент я попала вот в такую вот тусовку и в такую группу журналистов. Но через какое-то время Василий мне сказал, либо ты с ними, либо ты с нами.
Что будет с Машей, если там мы станем каким-то кругом ее общения?
Что будет с Кашином? Там бомба на него упадет, в переулке его караулит, или там открыто приедет, расстреляет из автоматов.
Protesters have been gathering throughout Russia's capital. They want to have a speedy and thorough investigation into the savage beating of reporter and blogger Oleg Kashin.
И, ну, на этом как бы весь кошмар не закончился.
Потому что когда человек чего-то боится, это видно. И вот Маша боялась.
All right. One more, and then you can tell people how they can attend the festival. And let's end with the world of comics. The film is Wonder Woman, the untold story of America's superheroines.
Exactly, and the nice
Wonder
part
Women, not Wonder Woman.
Right. Well, it actually starts with Wonder Woman, the cartoon character, who then and looks at kind of superheroes in a whole range of contexts and where women fit in there. Also goes to a few superheroes in real life. Good film, but again, the whole point here is to demonstrate that most people, when they think of action heroes, when they think about comic book characters, you know, it's the Hulk, it's it's Batman, it's Superman. Women are excluded from that. Wonder Woman was actually quite a revolutionary thing at the time that it was done.
So here's a minute of the trailer.
Spider-Man. Superman.
Batman, like all the classics. You know what I'm saying? Batman's dope, man. Can't stand that.
Spider-Man. Superman. Clark Kent.
What are the consequences for women when they are strong and when they are the central actors of their own lives?
film and animation.
Absolutely. And we actually have a couple of animated films throughout the festival as well. But I think, again, this is a really good example of how our culture in the past has excluded women. The film takes a strong look at how women can be superheroes, can be recognized as such, and really paints that portrait, which is great.
So tell people where they can get tickets, where they can see these movies when this Athena Film Festival starts on February 7th.
Starts February 7th, lasts the entire weekend through the 10th of February, just next week. And it's a great venue. You can get tickets at athenafilmfestival.com. Full listing, have full passes for the festival, or you can buy individual tickets for different shows. And the tickets are really going fast, so go to the website today. It's athenafilmfestival.com.
And it's many venues, but all on the Columbia and Barnard campus?
All on the Barnard campus, one venue in Columbia, but this is a program created by the Athena Center, which is a center at Barnard College, and Women in Hollywood, which is a blog that focuses on women. So it's great.
Somebody really wants to geek out, how many films can they see in these several
35 films
All right.
over the course of the weekend. Lots of shorts, and lots of people love the shorts, so come out and take a look.
Good luck with it. Thank you for talking through the clips with us. That was great.
Thank you.
And that's our program for today. We premiere a new show every Wednesday at 7:30, and tune into my radio program weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, how to fight illegal gun trafficking to New York. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.